Mr. Rittenhouse, can you take us live? Thank you. All right, I'll turn it over to Dr. Akbar. Ms. Autry, I don't know if you guys want to call us to order or if you would like me to.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm sorry. I'm trying to open board docs. So thank you, everyone. It is good to have everyone here today. It is February 19th, 2021. It's kind of weird to say it's 2021. And this is the ad hoc committee meeting, or the first meeting with communication team to talk about the ad hoc communications committee of the board. So give me a second to open up board docs so that I can see the order of the meeting that we were talking about. So while we do that, I guess it would be good if everyone here, I know I don't know everyone, if everyone could introduce themselves and share their role with our communications for the district. And we can start with Mark.
Mark Williams, I'm the Director of Marketing Communications.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Joanne Isaac. I work in teaching and learning. One of my roles is internal communication with curriculum, and I've transitioned this year to be working with Mark on external communication.
Carla Chapman, Community Relations, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And my work is really to support communications in outreach efforts, particularly related to families, caregivers, and community partners too.
Thank you.
Tommy?
Hi, everybody. Tommy Bruno. I'm the general manager of the Summit radio station, and couple claim to fame. I guess I created the Gilby concept about 15 years ago. And when I was first hired, I did PR and communications for the district. And about 12 years ago, assumed the responsibilities of the radio station to be our own. So we pay our own way, but we are a privileged partner of Akron Public Schools. The radio stations are located inside of Elliott Community Learning Center. We raised about $1 million to help build that facility. We've only been in there 1 year, and happy to join this board and help through some of the skills I may or may not have. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you very much.
Hey,
So
Ryan,
the first, oh, go ahead.
well, Ryan Rittenhouse, who is actually behind the scenes making this go live over the streaming YouTube, is also part of this team as well. Ryan, can you elaborate on what you do? Are you able to talk to us here? Ryan handles video services. He does creates videos for us for the most part, but he also does some social media posting and things like that to help us out.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Ryan, Mark, Tommy, Joanne, and Carla for being here today. The first thing we wanted to do is turn it over to you, Mark, and Carla, Tommy, and Joanne, just to share with us any updates around how the district currently markets to different populations, identifying any known challenges that we've incurred in different populations, and then some of our greatest opportunities that exist when it comes to communicating and getting people engaged in our district?
Well, I don't know. I think the biggest challenge would be the refugee population in North Hill, and we have great support from Loy Nguyen and translators, because virtually everything we do now has to be translated. So any kind of message that goes out, especially direct messages that go through email to our families, have to be translated. If we do a hard copy mailing of something and it goes to all of our families, we have translations done for the families who do not speak English, and that's a challenge, but it's less of a challenge because we have such good people working in that area. In terms of marketing, we try to primarily go for our families, and the efforts that we make are directed towards um, the families, the parents, the guardians, the grandparents, and the students to a lesser degree, but most of our messages are directed at families. And try to show them that we have a diverse culture in our schools, but also diversity of programs, arts, music, math, science, college and career academies, which encompasses a whole new world for student learning. We have a lot of different things that are inherently diverse. We don't have to work at making them so because of our kind of curriculum we offer. Any kind of photographic work we do, we're mindful of the kind of images we show, but for the most part, every time we take a picture, it's diverse. We have children of all different cultures in the images that we use. So I don't know if that answers your question, if that addresses it, but there's I guess the really tough challenge is when we go for free media, which I think is still very, very important for us with the rest of the community, not just our families, but when we're trying to reach people who are the people who support us, which is incredibly important. The people that whose hard-earned tax dollars support this public school system that's so essential. And free media is still the best way to reach them through television news, newspaper, online news publications, radio to a lesser degree. But we try to reach through all these different means, social media and included, but good old-fashioned broadcasting and print media still help a great deal, especially with folks that may not have any idea what we're doing because they don't have kids in our school system.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that is one of the challenges I think that is everyone probably will see is there's a public assault on public schools and what we do, which doesn't come from anyone in this room, but it comes externally, and unfortunately sometimes from um, people who are elected. And so I'm wondering, how do we do a better job of finding our communities where they are, to be able to communicate with them? Um, because I think that's part of the challenge is not only the students and families that are with us, but those students and families that could be with us, but are not because they're getting all these messages externally about false narratives that we're not doing a good job, which is furthest from the case. And so we need to do a good job of marketing to them too. So wondering in what ways have we worked on that?
Well, I think you could look at advertising as a possible way of doing that, although it's advertising is not necessarily cost effective in this market. We can't really use television because most of the people that are watching what we consider local television live in Cleveland, and they don't care. We have radio advertising is probably not that important for us. in terms of reaching the people that we really want to reach, because we don't have anybody, in radio that has a huge audience, I would say. And we are very mindful of how, we monitor our budget. So I would say billboard advertising is still probably the best way to reach a broad group of people with a message. But then the messages, we need to have, probably specific campaigns to do that with a call to action. It's not just, you don't just put up a billboard that just says, "Hi, here's who we are." That's a good broad way to reach a large number of people. But that challenge is, it's different in every market, in every city. And because of our proximity to Cleveland, it really, we've done less and less advertising. Magazines that don't really maybe help us, we don't advertise in very much anymore. We've kind of changed, and we've done a lot more social media advertising. It's a lot less expensive. People share it with other people. So if we advertise on Facebook, for example, a lot of that gets shared, and it's sort of it's like a snowball going down a hill. And because it's so affordable, we find that to be a really good way to advertise and reach a broad group of people. We're starting to work on using something called Hubspot, which is a social media management tool. It's very complicated to explain, but it helps not just coordinate our social media programs and campaigns, it gives us feedback on how many people we're reaching and what they're doing with the messages and things like that. So I think that once we get that up and running, we will probably have better metrics, a better idea of who we're really reaching. We're going to start, and through HubSpot, we're going to start using Facebook pages with our individual schools, so that each school can use its own Facebook page for its own message, but the district will also be able to put its messages on the school Facebook pages. And that has mathematically a pretty strong value for reaching huge numbers of people, especially if the message is something it's a district message. We can't assume that people are going to look at just the district Facebook page or our website or our Twitter account, but we can use 40 to 50 other accounts that are all viewed by different people. And I can't do the math on that right now, but I think that will be very helpful for us.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. Joanna, were you about to say something?
Well, I was just going to add to what Mark was saying. I know that I was happy to see in the advanced APS plan that they had listed one of the things that we need is something that manages that marketing. When you asked about challenges, that's one thing that I do see as a challenge. We have Mark's and his department do a good job of reaching a lot of different our families in different ways, but we really don't know where are they going, which one are they going to a lot, which ones do we need to put more effort into, which ones do we not. I mean, are there ones out there that we're spending time and effort doing that nobody's going to? So the HubSpot, I was fortunate enough to be able to see the back ends of that working, and it is pretty impressive with what it can do. It tracks information not only of how families are accessing it, but it gives you a whole lot of analytics on the back end that definitely can be beneficial. I also, you had asked about, I was just writing some notes, you had asked about how we are marketing and communicating now. And I don't, Mark, one thing that I wrote down too that is done is there's a lot of marketing materials that highlight opportunities that are in the schools, that such as the IB program and different specialty schools that we have, and that marketing material is out in buildings, and Mark can probably elaborate a little bit more about how that is used as well.
virtually every program we have has some collateral materials, yes.
And I also and I'll just add on to Mark's as well. I like the idea of HubSpot also to have that district message stay consistent, but while still giving that flexibility to schools to add their own types of communication on it too. So I think that's important.
I think too that we, and I haven't run the numbers, but a couple of years ago I did on free media, and we had thousands. I think it was up around 70,000 in 2 years, free media exposure, 70,000 different hits. A good deal of that, I will say, was LeBron James. It was then. It wasn't most of it, but if you were to take it and look at one, if there's one person, one school, one that was responsible for a larger piece of that than anybody else, it was LeBron, and that's helped us greatly. But if we took him out of the mix completely, we would still be, I can't, and most reporters have told me that they don't see any other school district with the kind of coverage we have in free media. And as hard as it is to get on Cleveland television, we actually do a pretty good job of it because we have interesting stories to tell, and they have reporters who are interested. If you know certain reporters and you know what they like to cover, or you sort of follow the news every day and see what they need, and you have good relationships, which we do, the reporters will call and ask if you have anything going on because we're transparent. We're very forthcoming. I always say they don't call us first because they're going alphabetically. They call us first because we respond. We make our people available to do good stories with them. We give them access when it isn't always easy to do. It isn't always convenient because teachers are busy, administrators are busy, but people stop and make the time here to talk to reporters whenever we can to show everybody that we are. It's not about necessarily promoting what we do. I mean, it is, but it's also about saying that we are publicly funded. We are an open book. We're transparent. Here's who we are. Here's what we do, good or bad. If some reporter calls about something that's happening that we're not crazy about, we still talk to them. And a lot of places don't do that. A lot of people shut the door and say, no, we don't want to do that. And David's been great. David James has been great about being open with everything that we have going on here. And I really think that that's helpful because it shows people that we're television is still a really great way to get your story across because it shows images of children and people's emotions that are hopefully happy. And it positions us as a diverse and fun school system for kids to come to.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Autry, I don't know if you have any questions.
So it's good to hear all of this. Some of this is really familiar to me, with my PTA background. I think the district does a really good job of communicating our positives. I think most anybody can tell you a little bit about the Performing Arts School and the I Promise School, just because, and our various awards that we get. So I think we do a really good job. So I'm gonna turn it on the flip side because we need to have some of those uncomfortable conversations. I can remember probably about 10 to 12 years ago, there was a period of time where the Beacon Journal, who's doing a lot better just let me clarify, they're doing a lot better now. There was a period of time where, any crime that happened on the west side of Akron, they would reference Buchtel. And it was just really challenging because we already have challenges, number one. And I felt, and this is my PTA hat, I didn't feel protected by the district. I was waiting for the district to somehow come out against that and say, well, hey, stop, cease and desist, whatever, because we were getting hammered by any crime that happened on the west side. It would just say, oh, down the street from Buchtel or a former Buchtel graduate, And it was really, I mean, to the point where we had a campaign with the PTA where we bombarded the Beacon Journal with emails and whatnot and phone calls to, stop that, because it wasn't fair to the school and the hardworking staff. So I think it's important that we have something in place that can combat those types of things when they happen. Because if we're one district, we have to value all of our schools. So that's just one thing. Another thing that I think is very helpful are the all calls that go out. And I can give you an example. At one point in time, when I was on the Akron Council of PTAs, and we were doing the citywide talent show, and somehow the all call went out with my personal phone number, if you want to audition. And I tell you, it worked. Probably for a 1 week straight, my phone did not stop ringing. And I can't help but think about if we had, something in place that could, better manage that. It was an effective way to get information. And of course, it was an interesting event. So people were passionate about it. But the all calls work, especially if we're thoughtful about, if we're getting 4 and 5 all calls a week, I think that can be overwhelming to a lot of families. So just keeping that in mind when we do put them out. So that's one thing. I'm trying to think. Another thing that I know is a challenge from my experience in PTA is when we're trying to reach our families, they have like 7, 8 different phone numbers on file sometimes. And even just recently, I volunteered for the Career Expo for the 9th graders, and I had a list to deliver some items to different families. And on that list were the phone numbers so that I can call and say, I've dropped your package off. And some of those students had 7 phone numbers to call. I'm not calling 7 phone numbers to figure out which one, so I can imagine when important information needs to go out, how is the secretary managing that? How are we managing that as a district when we put those all calls? Do all 7 numbers go in the system? Do we have something in place where, we can weed out the bad numbers? I mean, that's a whole separate, piece of time that's required on top of, what our support staff is already doing. So those are just some thoughts that pop up in my mind.
We have a telecommunications department, which is infrastructure, phones and communication lines and things like that. And a gentleman named Joe Tulak runs that, and Joe's really good. And I agree with you on the all calls. I think we have to be more judicious about the way we use them. They are effective, but they're only effective if we use them wisely and not overdo it. And we need to keep the messages short. As far as phone numbers, everyone is asked to submit one main number that they want calls to go to. And Joe has that one number for each family. And if something goes wrong and it bounces back, or someone notifies us of a change, then he changes it in his database. But this year has been pretty smooth with that. I haven't heard, I'll check and see, but I haven't heard that we've had too many issues with that. As far as Booktel goes, the Beacon Journal has made a stark change in the way that it looks at what you're talking about as of maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And they don't do that anymore. I'll just say that. And if you see that they do, let me know. Keep in mind, journalists do what they do, and we can make suggestions. And they still do what they do. And I've been doing this for a while now, and I'm pretty good at talking to reporters about, maybe we'd like to see this, or we'd like to see that, or we'd appreciate it if you didn't do this. But still, they're going to do what they're going to do. And I give the Beacon Journal credit for taking a really more focused look at that pattern and being more mindful of it. I will also say that, I don't know if you noticed this, but about, what's the date? Almost exactly 8 years ago, which is when I started working here, the West Side Leader began covering the near west side of Akron because I'd had a conversation with somebody there saying the West Side is the West Side. It's all West Akron. West Akron isn't just Northwest Akron and Fairlawn. And they said, you're right. And so they've covered quite a few stories at Schumacher and Krause, Rankin, back in the day. They covered Buchtel, a lot of good stories. It's obviously been more of a challenge since we've been out of the buildings, but they're very open to covering stories there. And I think that's been really good. It's been good for that paper, and it's been good for us as well. What was the second? You mentioned the second thing. It just flew out of my brain. You mentioned Buchtel, and you mentioned all calls, and what was in between, Diana? What was there?
Family phone numbers.
What's that?
Family phone numbers.
No, I mentioned that with Joe Tulak. There was something in the middle. Wow.
Yeah, I said the multiple numbers, the all call,
And the news. I think that was the three. The news outlets.
Is that it?
The journalism.
Yeah,
aspect.
I don't know if I answered all those or not, but I do think though with and I'm sorry about the all call thing with your phone number. Oh, I know what I was going to say.
It was wonderful. We had a great show.
Well,
I don't know what I thought with 20,000 kids in the district,
Yeah. Well, we now
I don't think we
also
thought of that, Diane.
well, we also now can email every family, and they have actually, in their infinite wisdom, given me some control over that. Somebody took a big chance on giving me the button for the nuclear codes on that one, but I'm, there are things that we need to get directly to our families in a lot of different ways. And an email, believe it or not, it goes to 20,336 email addresses. And a lot of folks respond to those messages. So it's a combination of all these different things. And our strategy has to be that we don't use everything all the time. Unless it's a dire emergency, then we will. But we have to be strategic about when do we use the email, when do we do an all call, when do we don't always use Twitter. Facebook is much more valuable to us for most of our stuff than Twitter is. But Twitter is really good for certain things. And so it's not even just about what you put out, it's how you do it and what time you do it and where it goes.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate everything that you shared. So I'm going to ask one more question, then we're going to move on to the next, which is around community engagement and how do we, after we send the message, how are we connecting families to the resources and things that the message actually is directing them to go to or to utilize. So my last question has to do with non-traditional routes of getting our news out there. So, for example, the Devil Strip is a growing readership here in the Akron area, and the Reporter newspaper, which is the Black press here. Specifically, I know they shared that they don't get anything from Akron Public Schools, but would like to. So I'm wondering, how do we utilize those entities as well?
The Devil Strip isn't the publication that's going to give you even 5 stories a year, probably. You might get 2 big stories in the Devil Strip, and we communicate with them. We communicate with the Akronists. We do. They do more in-depth reporting. So when we have stories that go deeper, sort of like NPR does, but even more so than NPR, we use those sources. But again, it has to fit their.
Hey, Mark, can I jump in?
Yeah.
So yeah, to that question, I just want to say that Devil Strip audience, since 1955, Akron Public Schools has owned a radio station, and we run it differently over these last 15 years. but you're reaching that audience. We run 2,500 spots a year that Mark gives us. Currently, we have 9 in rotation. Those are on just about every other hour on our radio station. So know that, and we reach an audience of tax-paying adults that work, that are engaged in the community, that are kind of hard to reach. That is through our audience. So we do cover that devil strip. I don't know, that medium, I believe. The other thing Mark said that I think he used the wrong word. He calls it free media. I think Mark's done a great job of putting everything out there. And as somebody who used to work in television like Mark, it's earned media, Mark. You've put it all out there, and I think that they find the stories easy to do. You tee them up for them, and we can always do a better job, but I don't think it's free media. I think it's earned. And in my 20 years in the district, 20 plus years, honestly, the stories that they're running right now, to me, are better than I've ever seen in my 2 decades with the district. And I just wanted to wrap up and say, you know, when I started, you know, we had an image problem 20 years ago, a much more significant image problem than we've ever had over these last 10 years. And we launched a campaign called Your Success is Our Success. And we keyed on graduates that have done great things. And we did billboard and print and media. And it was a good campaign. But in that time, I interviewed so many people about this district. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, just getting them to give us that little soundbite. And it's just interesting because I was looking back on my notes, and I interviewed 677 teachers or 677 parents. And of them, 75% plus said the reason they send their kids to Akron Public Schools, and I would bet $100 right now that it hasn't changed, is the teachers. That the teachers are the single greatest asset we have in this district. And I would venture to say that, you know, those stories, Mark, of telling the stories about great teachers and about how dedicated they are and how experienced is one that's really important to tell. And then the last thing I'll say is, you know, Gilby came around because we were losing students for the first time in the district's history at the elementary level. And you guys know that, you know, making the choice to send your youngster to an elementary Akron Public Schools is one thing. Akron Public School, the middle school is where things start to, you know, drop off, and they have a lot more choices, and high school obviously is magnified from that. But Gilby came to be as a marketing tool to reach those youngsters and their parents. So just before we move forward, I just thought it was important to look backward and give Mark a little pat on the back because, and Ryan for that matter, Ryan Rittenhouse, you know, we had 6 in that department when I started, 6 plus in that department. And there's not 6 people in that department right now. So that's all I'll say, and I'll leave it open to the floor.
Thanks, Tommy. I would also mention, you mentioned the reporter, and we've done a lot of advertising. In fact, the reporter is about the only publication left that we've done advertising in. We've reduced that this year just because of COVID, and we haven't had the same kinds of programs to really promote in the same way. But and generally, when I have sent things to them, it generally does not get coverage in the traditional way where a reporter calls and asks questions. And I've been a little bit, it's a little bit disconcerting, and I'll have a talk with Bill over there about it. But I'm pretty sure he's on my media list because I've got a long media list, and I'll go back and check it. But I can't. That sort of surprises me.
Okay. Thank you very much. Carla, the next item is yours, and really trying to see what do you see as the challenges to once the messages are sent out, what's the challenges in getting our families and community members connected to those resources?
Yeah, so I'm just going to reference the I think it's 3 bullets under engagement where the family and caregiver connections are listed. We talk a lot, and Joanne and Mark and I, is it every Friday, Joanne? We meet and have a conversation related to internal, external communications. And we talk a lot about where families get their information, parents and caregivers. And we know that most of our families and caregivers are either going to get their information, I know Mrs. Autry knows this, from a trusted caregiver or a neighbor, a friend, or the school, right? And so how do we best equip our schools to share both district information and school information? So that's one of the challenges and opportunity, I would say, that exists as well. And one of the reasons why we're looking at the Facebook redesign and how that gets used at both the district and the building level, because we know that people are first going to go to their school, right? And to their teachers and to their other family friends. And then the other thing I thought of as I was listening to you all converse about communication is how can we strategically use our family liaisons to be those message ambassadors. And so family liaisons are typically neighborhood residents, right? Or current or former parents, but they have this amazing community capital, right? This relationship capital with families. And how well are we at really equipping them to be message ambassadors? So I think that's one of the challenges and opportunities that we have, is to really be more than we have. And I think we do this because Mark provides us with collateral material and information to share, but really being strategic about what they share when they're in conversation with families, because we're really trying to get at who is going to miss whatever happens on TV, who's not going to get it on radio, and who's not going to read it on the newspaper or pick up the all call, right? We need to ensure that we are strategic about how we use folks who have those community connections, how we work with them. And then the other bullet is the engage, inform, and build support with the community for the passage and ongoing support of operating levies. We talk a lot again. One of the challenges is how do we deploy our human capital in ways that take them into the community to speak about our schools, about our good work, when there isn't a levy, right? And so we have this incredible machine that we gear up for, but it also presents itself as an opportunity to utilize our central office teams, our teacher teams as sort of these ambassadors of district messages at the neighborhood level. And that could mean those ward meetings, it can mean those community events. And I know we do a lot of that, right? But how can we maximize this opportunity of when we do that? What are we sharing? And how do we do that when it is most important around kindergarten registration or, graduation dates or whatever might be happening that would require folks to know more about open enrollment, and so rather than relying solely on our traditional methods, how do we better use our human capital, our staff, in buildings, in communities, so that we're reaching folks. And I think you said it, Dr. Akbar, where they are. Because some folks are still only going to get their information from a friend or a trusted source or a teacher or a principal. And we want to be sure that we all have a way of ensuring that people are equipped to support that work.
Thank you very much, Ms. Autry.
Yeah, and just kind of piggybacking on what Carla was talking about in terms of the family liaisons. I mean, that is such an important role because we have such a big district. Those liaisons are going to be better able to identify the specific cultural differences at each building. So, because what works at one school is not necessarily going to work, at another school. And then just throwing in as far as, you talked about central office teams, teacher teams. I'm going to go ahead and say where we can really probably have some growth is engaging our coaches and our advisors of extracurriculars, because we see how passionate our community is around sports. And these coaches, have captive audiences. These families, they're going to do whatever the coach says.
Yeah.
And so it comes with a lot of responsibility. If you're a head coach, then I feel like you should be a part of the team that help gets district messages out. Yeah. So, and I know me and Carla, that PTA survey, you guys came out to a football game at Book. Those 5,000 people there. And not at the PTA. They were at the game. So that's an example of, but that might not necessarily be the same situation at a different school. So those family liaisons and our coaching staffs and our, advisors of extracurricular activities who have those large groups of students, band, things of that nature, I think it's valuable on getting these district messages out. They have captive audiences.
Yeah, I really like that. That is, we say all the time that our liaisons, they're not our academic specialists, they're not our curriculum specialists or discipline, but they are outreach specialists, right? They know who to speak to, who to go to, how to get information in the hands of their audience.
Yeah, Carla, I know that you and I've talked about this quite a few times. One of the issues that we have struggled with is that, and as Diana said, this is a big district and we have, 40 to 50, 45 to 50 buildings and 21,000 students. And each school has a sense of its own identity. Kids and families identify with their school more than they do the district. I think the schools themselves are that way too. They don't always think about the school district. So when we have, news or something for them to put out to their families, we created websites for every school so they could use those to get to their families. They haven't really been used, the way that they should be. And that's why we're sort of moving into the Facebook realm, because I think it's more like a living, breathing information source where people can respond quickly if they so desire. We're going to use, Carla had an idea of using the cluster captains that we have for each cluster of schools via Hubspot to start to help with messaging for the individual schools themselves, which I think will be good. But I think there has to be a mix of an identity of the schools where they keep their identity of who they are, but they also have a realization that the school district itself is important too. And it's unlike a lot of other models that you could think of. I tried to think of something similar, like a bank, right? There's a big bank downtown and then it has a lot of little branches out and about. Well, that's easier. The bank president says everybody do it this way and they all do it this way. Every bank looks the same. They all have the same colors, but each school has its own personality. And we try really hard too, through the earned media, thanks Tommy, to showcase the different schools, the different kinds of students they have. Akron Early College has a sort of a totally different profile than Robinson Elementary, than Ellett, than, you know, Hatton. They're all different. And when people see stories about our kids, I get responses from people that they're shocked that, wow, I can't believe that somebody that talented or that smart, you know, goes to that school. And we have so we try to help the schools promote themselves individually as the district, but the schools themselves don't necessarily, it doesn't go both ways. And that's something I've been working on, and, you know, have not been terribly successful at remedying that one.
I would say one more challenge is definitely, and we ponder over this, the misinformation too, even with all that we do and all that goes out and communication efforts and conversations. I could go to a meeting and someone would say, whatever happened to our career education, you know, and it just drives you a little crazy because you think, well, how did we miss whatever this population might be in ensuring that they too know that, right? So there are still those challenges with just managing what people will take and run with.
Well, let me say this as an apples to apples example. If we put out a story about something at Mason School or something at, you know, North High School, it goes out in the same way as the message from the I Promise School. People are seeing that message. People are seeing the I Promise message. It isn't that we're not using the right vehicles and all the proper avenues to reach all the people. Because whenever something goes out, whenever I put something out from I Promise, whenever they put their own out, the foundation's a whole other matter because they have their own base of people. But in terms of our people and our followers and our community, the issue isn't that we're not hitting all the right places. I mean, a lot of times, you know, people, the tail sort of wagging the dog on communications, and you think we're doing pretty much everything we can do, and maybe some things that we maybe could do more of or spend more money on some other things, but just because people aren't getting it or listening doesn't necessarily mean we're not doing something right. And LeBron is a great example. That stuff, that the number of hits that we see on Facebook when there's a LeBron story, and then underneath it there's something about APS finances. Sorry, Ryan, but I mean, you know, or something like that. It's totally different, and it's at the same time on the same medium and the same audience. And so don't automatically just think that, Carla, you know, that people aren't hearing your message, or, you know, or they're not paying attention. I think that sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But, you know, you've done a great job at networking. You're the old-fashioned way, one person at a time. People, you know, meeting with families and kids and setting up the, you know, all the different activities you do for families. It's unbelievable. That all works. It isn't terribly sexy in the world of communication, but it really does work. I mean, I wish we could do what LeBron does. I wish we could be that. And every time we put something out, I got 93,000 views on Facebook. But unless it's a school closing because of snow, where we'll get 40,000, which is pretty good, we're not going to approach LeBron's numbers. But
I
hope that makes sense.
Did you just sideline call me old?
Did I say that?
I think you sideline called me old.
No, I don't think I did that. Because I'm older than you are, so I would never do
that. Thank you very much. One of the things that I think I'm gathering from this, and I know Joanne and Diana both have their hands up, but I also want to say after that we're going to go to our conclusion. But I want to connect it to the ad hoc committee and the advanced APS. one of the things that we want to do based on what I'm hearing is maybe figure out between someone from your teams as well as some members of the community around what are some other ways we could utilize platforms or even suggestions that will help get at some of those challenges that you mentioned. Getting to families and messages so that they don't just, the spreadsheets messages don't get lost as much as the, I promise messages get amplified. So want to figure out how do we amplify them. And then the other thing is looking at how we can work together with the community to either build a tool or utilize current tools, which will be more preferable, that might be out there to enhance what you're doing if there's gaps. So maybe we can do a survey or some focus groups to identify what are some of the gaps and what's out there that we're not thinking about. You have Snapchat and TikTok for some of the younger people, but are there things that the parents are using outside of Facebook that we just aren't thinking about or haven't utilized? And I don't know what that is. There may not be anything, but I think it's worth trying to connect some of the challenges and opportunities that you see with what parents and families and even community members, because we're also communicating to individuals who may not have kids in our district yet, or at one point had kids in our district and still have children that could come back to the district. And so our communications really is going to all of those audiences and figuring out how do we close some of those gaps. So I think the board wants to work with all of you in order to help figure out how we work with our community to do that. So Joanne, I'm sorry, wanted to just connect that back to why we were here.
Thank you. As I was listening to Carla and Mark, I wanted to add one other challenge that I see is that keeping that branding of APS. So a lot of times schools are out there showcasing this amazing stuff and you watch it and you have no idea if it's an Akron public school. So you lose that's us, that's our kids, we're doing that stuff. And I also think that along that same line, sometimes there's amazing stuff and it's the way they put it out there. So blurry and dark, or it doesn't, it's not inviting to the watcher. So even though it's great things, it doesn't always look as enticing. And I know that's part of the marketing piece too. But I know that, when you keep something well branded like college and career academies, there's no doubt the college and career academies are part of Akron Public Schools, right? Because that's what they use as part of their message. They're tied to us. And I think that, sometimes that doesn't happen across all of our buildings with all these amazing things that are happening. And I know, Dr. Akbar, you said something about amplifying that. And I really think one way to amplify that is to make sure that it all looks like it's Akron Public Schools. That was my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Ms. Autry?
Yes, thank you. I was just thinking about a comment that Carla had about misinformation, and I do find it amazing that I still have people who don't know what new tech is. And we're 10 years into that. And I still have people who say, you guys should bring back career ed. So I say all of that to say sometimes, again, the individual building cultures are affecting our communication, because whereas the district might be pushing college and career academy, and I'm using Bookville as an example, we're still talking about new tech. We're still talking about, okay, we need a new principal. So those are our conversations. We're not at the college and career academy level necessarily. That's not maybe the forefront of our conversations because, hey, our issues right now are we need a principal or what's new tech. So, and then when I think about the fast pace of our district, I mean, things move fast and sometimes information trickles down and it's months old, but it might be brand new in certain communities because once again, we were dealing with XYZ while ABC is being introduced, this whole new initiative, and we're like, you know, what should we be focusing on? So that's a challenge for us, I think. And I just wanted to mention that we move pretty fast.
We do, and I think that one of the areas that is a challenge in terms of, because look, you have to have human beings to do this. I think people think that communications just magically happens with computers, and you have to have people that make decisions, good editorial decisions. We use people from the outside, that help make us look good with graphics and really good collateral pieces. And if we do billboards, graphic arts, and that, all of that is really good and it looks professional, and we get wonderful comments on that work. What we do internally is more the more day-to-day ground level kind of work, and it requires leadership from each school building for this to work. It doesn't, and if I could think of a good analogy, I don't have one right now, but when we have something for a school that we think would be a really good thing for them to get out to the public, sometimes it just kind of falls on the floor. It doesn't get out. And I think that that's because the principals are really busy. And I don't think that this is necessarily a priority for everybody. And I get that. I understand how people might feel that way, but I think that we need to have, and this is why we hope Facebook is going to help, because I think people go home at night, everybody knows how to use Facebook for the most part, and they can post things and they can do it from their phone, from their computer. It's way easier than the website. And I'm kind of pinning a lot of hopes on this development with HubSpot to help us sort of take over some of that and get the principals maybe to do some of this work, or to have somebody on their staff who can oversee a lot of that work. And it's not quite as intimidating as the website might have been.
Yeah, and the other thing that we are rich with is we're rich with resources nearby. So, for example, with the colleges and universities, you have Stark State, University of Akron, Kent State, with their PR marketing and visual communication programs, and they all need internships. How do we utilize that to support what we're doing? Because to be honest with you, one of the things that in my daily work, I we're doing diversity work, and part of that has to do with communication and strategy, and including people who may not have the time to do, or feel like they may not have the time to invest in the work that needs to be done, because it's very time consuming. This also is time consuming, but it needs to happen, as you said, Mark. But is there a way to utilize some of those talents and resources to work with each school, to put some of those messages out? Because if we're trying to add more things to the principal's plate, that's probably why some of the things get kind of put on the back burner, and they get put out 3 weeks after it happens. And I'm not saying that's the definite case, but there's a potential for that because there's so much going on. And as we look at returning back to school, using our principals to be able to do some of that message sharing, is probably going to be virtually impossible. And so I just want to be sensitive to all of that, everything that you said, Mark and Joanne and Tommy and Carla, and what you all have going on, and saying, okay, so as a group, this group here, and maybe some other entities in the community, can we bring people together to come up with a mechanism that utilizes additional resources to fill those gaps in a way that will be more effective.
Well, and I want to just say for the record, I don't want people to think that I'm telling principals to do more work. I'm saying that there would be somebody within the infrastructure of a school. There may be somebody, an English teacher, I don't know, a support staff person who loves to use Facebook that we could have do it. It doesn't, certainly I would not expect principals to do that, but I think what we need is that support from first and foremost from each building. Before we even think about doing anything else, they have to buy into this, that this is something that's important. There are schools that I never hear from. I mean, our schools that I never hear from. We have certain ones that are wonderful that contact the principals or, they say, hey, here's a good story idea. I have a teacher doing this. I have these 3 kids that did that. We took a video. Could you use it? Could you? And we get it out. Sometimes we get their videos on Cleveland TV stations. We have a whole series of Black History videos that are going to run on Channel 5 next week. And we did a bunch for Martin Luther King Day on Channel 5 as well. We've really done well with that. But there are schools that I can tell you right now, I don't ever hear from. And that's pretty amazing. That's amazing. Because everybody knows that if you have a story, idea, whatever, send it to me. We'll try to formulate it into something, get people together, make it work. That it would be helpful.
Which is one of the reasons why we, excuse me, Dr. Akbar,
Sorry.
one of the reasons why we really wanted to provide some additional support through our cluster team people who are assigned to buildings, right, during specific times of the year. But what would it take to make a call, right, or a visit soon to a building to say, hey, I'm just here for 15 minutes to hear about some things you're doing, right? And to help you get it on our new Facebook presence. That's the kind of thing that might need to happen. And it may be that the principal says, I've charged this person, right, to do this for our building. So they're going to expect you every month and they're going to have something ready. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect, Carla, exactly. Just maybe looking at how to set that system up will be great. So we're running out of time. The last thing I wanted to ask is, as we think about what we need to do, I think we need to identify, now that we've talked about some of the great things that we're doing and then also some of the challenges and potential gaps, maybe see who else should be at the table to help us strategize on how to fill those gaps, and to which gaps or opportunities to focus on, because we can't focus on everything and we can't solve everything. But one of the things that Mark started the conversation with was our immigrant communities, or community that have family members whose English is not their first language. It'll be great if we could get some individuals who work more closely with that community involved in this conversation, so that we can maybe fill some of those opportunities as well, and other communities that we feel like we can build some of the areas. So I'm thinking about the schools that you don't have to say them here, but some of the schools that you mentioned you never hear from, Mark, because we have some schools who do a really good job of communicating what they do, and there's others who don't. And maybe part of it is outside of this meeting, trying to figure out what their challenges are in getting those stories out there. And so those are the type of things I'm thinking about, like some things that we need to do in between meetings, and then also who else needs to be a part of this as we move forward. So that's something that I'll say, if you could think about moving forward, and then how often do you think we should meet?
Is that a question you want us to answer right now?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
The frequency. Yes. Yes. All right. Yes.
I wasn't sure. It got so quiet. I thought, oh, boy, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that one. Is how often we should meet. I'm not sure. Anybody has any ideas?
Is monthly too much time between meetings?
I mean, I don't think monthly is a bad idea. I mean, everybody has a lot of meetings with a lot going on, and I'm not sure if if we add more for everybody, if we just get less done. I don't know.
And it may be that with a few other voices to help with the work. So I always think about our administrators in buildings, right? Who might need to be here because they ultimately own some of this work as well. And it may be helpful to hear some of their thoughts about
I think Loy should be here. Absolutely.
Yeah,
She would be, if you want one person that can speak for a really huge group, it would be Dr. Nguyen. She would be helpful, and she does the work. I mean, she's really in there, getting it done on all these translations, and she understands the cultural issues, the language barriers, and all of that. I will say that our email, when we email to our families at home, it translates everything into all of our languages, which is pretty cool. So those messages get through.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and our website does too. So when they go to the website, they can translate to their language.
Yeah, that's another helpful piece. Definitely. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll at least maybe. I'm sorry, Joanne.
I was just going to say, would it be appropriate to have a principal representation? So a lot of what we were talking about were how principals can, maybe not them specifically, but how does it work to get that messaging out in the structure of a school community or a school building? And maybe it would be somebody who is, who, I don't know if it would be somebody who is doing, well, Mark, sending you the information, or maybe it's somebody who is not, that can maybe shed some light on why they aren't, or what the issues are.
Or should it be Mary Kelly and Mark Black, who could tell us, what the structure is and what might be possible. I don't know, because if only one principal comes, we can't really have them speak for everybody, but Mary and Mark might, and then they're able to go to the principals and have that conversation. So that might work.
Yeah. And what we're looking for is perspective, right? So not that they'll speak for everyone, but just perspective.
Yep.
And I think that would be good.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, well, I think we'll possibly we'll try to have a meeting again in March, and look forward to maybe putting something together for the committee to think about around who else needs to be at the table, so we can get those invitations to them, and then also out of everything we talked about, what do you think the top 2 or 3 opportunities are that we can work on? Because one of the things we want to do is have something tangible done by the start of the next academic year to hopefully start a process of enhanced communications with some of the groups that we're talking about. So this isn't a long-standing thing, but what are some of the short-term wins that we can, as a board, help the district get off into the start? Again, our goal is to help with the advanced APS around our engagement area, and communicating with all of our stakeholders and our caregivers and all of that. So just wanted to put that out there that's the goal of our work, is to show our commitment to the investment of that work and helping with at least one opportunity as a board to get that off the ground. All right, and the next meeting, Ms. Autry will be leading, so just wanted to put that out there. And so we'll be hearing from Ms. Autry on some of that as well moving forward. All right, well, I think that's all, unless anyone has anything else they want to share. Thank you very much, Tommy, Joanne, Mark, and Carla, and Ryan Rittenhouse and Ryan Pendleton for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we will see everyone at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.